What if the Matrix was never built with machines? What if there are no wires, no servers, no external system controlling you from the outside? What if the Matrix is something far more intimate, something you wake up with every morning, something you answer to when someone calls your name, something you defend, even when it hurts you? What if the Matrix is who you think you are? Pause for a moment, before beliefs, before opinions, before everything you were taught to call yourself. Ask quietly, who are you without your story? Most people never ask this question, not because it's complicated, but because it's dangerous. Because the moment you question identity, the system begins to shake. And this is where the ancient warning begins. Long before screens hypnotized attention, long before algorithms shaped desire, long before control became invisible, the Gnostics spoke of a false world, not a broken world, not an evil world, a constructed one. They warned that reality itself was layered, and that humanity lived inside the outermost shell. To them, the universe was not the ultimate truth, but a copy, a shadow, an imitation shaped by a lesser intelligence. They called the Demiurge, not a devil, not a monster, an architect, a being obsessed with order, structure, definition. The Demiurge did not rule through violence, it ruled through form, names, roles, rules. It created a world where everything had a label, and then convinced humanity that the label was the thing. Body became self, role became identity, function became meaning. And once this happened, the prison no longer needed walls. When people hear Matrix, they imagine technology, simulations, artificial intelligence, machines feeding on humans. But this is a modern misunderstanding. The original Matrix was not mechanical, it was psychological. The Gnostics never warned about computers, they warned about identification. They understood something modern minds are only beginning to glimpse. Control does not require force when perception itself is owned. The Matrix is not what surrounds you, it is what you believe you are. Identity feels personal, intimate, sacred. That's why it works. From the moment you are born, you are given a name. Before you can speak, you are already defined. This is who you are. This is what you are. This is how you should be. Over time, these definitions pile up. Gender, culture, success, failure, worth, normalcy. Each one adds another layer, not forced, accepted, and eventually, you forget the difference between the mask and the face beneath it. The Gnostics called this the false self, not evil, not wrong, just mistaken. A character mistaken for consciousness itself. Modern psychology calls it the ego. Gnostics understood it differently. To them, the ego was not the enemy, it was the interface, a necessary translator between consciousness and the physical world. But something went wrong. The interface became the identity. The tool declared itself the user, and when that happened, consciousness fell asleep inside its own creation. You stopped being awareness having an identity. You became the identity, imagining it had awareness. This is the true inversion. This is the Matrix. A system cannot control awareness. Awareness has no edges, no loyalty, no fear. But identity? Identity can be shaped, threatened, rewarded. Identity wants approval, belonging, security. Identity fears rejection, meaninglessness, death. So the system speaks to identity. It tells you what success looks like, what failure means, who matters, who doesn't. And identity listens because it believes its survival depends on it. The Demiurge doesn't need chains. Identity is enough. This is why suffering persists, not because it is meaningful, but because it is functional. Suffering reinforces identity. Pain asks, "Why is this happening to me?" Fear asks, "How do I protect myself?" Desire asks, "What do I need to become?" All of these questions keep attention locked inside the false self. The moment attention turns inward toward awareness itself, the system weakens, so distraction is constant, noise is endless. Silence is avoided because silence dissolves identity. Look closely. You are not forced to think, you are guided, not told what to believe, but what is acceptable to question. Certain ideas are encouraged, others feel uncomfortable, dangerous, taboo. This is not censorship, it is conditioning. And the deepest conditioning of all is convincing you that your thoughts are your own. The Matrix does not say, "Think this," it says, "This is who you are." And once identity accepts that, control becomes effortless. The Gnostics believed something radical. They believed that within every human exists a fragment of something beyond the system. They called it the divine spark. Not a soul in the religious sense, not a personality, but raw awareness, untouched, unconditioned, unlabeled. The part of you that notices thoughts instead of being them. The part of you that watches fear instead of obeying it. The part of you that feels something is wrong even when everything appears normal. This spark is not trapped. It is simply forgotten. Awakening is not exciting at first. It is destabilizing. Because awakening is not gaining something. It is losing something. You begin to lose certainty. Labels loosen. Stories crack. The identity panics. It asks, "If I am not this, then what am I?" This fear is not a flaw. It is proof you are close. The Matrix does not fear rebellion. It fears awareness. Because awareness does not fight, it sees. And once seen, the illusion cannot be unseen. The Demiurge is not hunting you. It does not need to. It simply maintains structure, rules, forms, identities. It is not evil. It is limited. It cannot comprehend what exists beyond structure. And neither can identity. That is why identity defends the system. That is why people ridicule what threatens their worldview. Not because they are ignorant, but because their sense of self is at stake. Today, identity is no longer shaped slowly. It is optimized. Trends decide value. Metrics decide worth. Algorithms decide relevance. You are encouraged to brand yourself, to package identity, to become predictable. The more predictable you are, the easier you are to guide. This is not oppression. This is efficiency, and most never resist it, because identity enjoys attention. The most secure prison is one the prisoner protects. Fear says, "Stay who you are." Belief says, "This is all there is." Doubt says, "Don't look too closely. These are not enemies. They are safeguards." Installed long before you could question them. The real Matrix is not outside you. It is the unquestioned assumptions you defend as me. Gnosis is not learning. It is remembering, not adding truth, but removing illusion, not becoming someone new, but seeing what was never you. The moment you stop trying to define yourself, something opens. A quiet awareness, unimpressed by status, unafraid of loss, uninterested in roles. This awareness does not announce itself. It simply watches, and in watching, the matrix loosens its grip. Awareness comes with a cost. Isolation, misunderstanding, the loss of belonging. Most people feel the crack and retreat. They return to identity because it is warm, because it is familiar, because it tells them who to be. The Matrix welcomes them back, not with punishment, but with comfort. Awakening is not loud. It does not protest. It does not preach. It withdraws belief. It stops feeding the system with unquestioned identity, and this is enough. A system built on identification cannot survive awareness. Zivi, the question that remains. So ask yourself slowly, honestly, who are you? Without your job, without your fears, without your history, who is watching your thoughts right now? That watcher has no name, no role, no identity, and it was never imprisoned. Only forgotten. The Matrix was never technology. It was never external. It was never something you had to escape. It was something you mistook for yourself. And the moment that confusion begins to dissolve, the system doesn't collapse. It simply loses its authority. And what remains is not a new belief, not a new path, but a quiet remembering, something ancient, something you always knew. And once seen, it cannot be unseen. There is something subtle that happens. Once the illusion of identity is questioned, the mask begins to speak. It does not say, "This is false." It says, "This is dangerous." The mind produces reasons, responsibilities, consequences, futures to protect. But look carefully. Who is afraid? Awareness does not panic. Awareness does not argue. Awareness does not need justification. Only identity does. The mask believes that if it dissolves, you will disappear. But the Gnostics warned of this exact confusion. They said the false self survives by convincing you that it is the only self, that without it, there is nothing. And this is the final deception, because what you truly are does not depend on memory, personality, or history. Those are costumes. Awareness wears them, but is never contained by them. The fear you feel when identity cracks is not death. It is withdrawal, like removing a drug. That once defined your sense of reality. Here is something rarely spoken aloud. The system does not follow awareness. It cannot. The Matrix operates through form, through definition, through repetition. Awareness has no form, no position, no ideology, no allegiance. Once attention stops identifying with the character, the system loses its reference point. This is why awakening feels lonely, not because you are separated from others, but because you are no longer meeting them at the level of masks. You see patterns where others see personalities. You see conditioning where others see choice. And you realize something unsettling. Most conversations are not exchanges of awareness. They are negotiations between identities trying to survive. This is not judgment. It is clarity. And clarity does not isolate you. It simply removes false intimacy. The Gnostics called this standing outside the world while still walking within it. Present, but not possessed. There is no dramatic escape, no collapse of the system, no final revelation broadcast to the masses. The Matrix does not end. It continues because it must. What changes is your relationship to it. You still have a name, a role, a life, but they are no longer you. They are tools, costumes worn lightly. This is the unspoken exit, not leaving the world, but no longer being owned by it. The Gnostics never promised paradise. They promised freedom from confusion, freedom from mistaking the interface for the source, freedom from believing that your worth, fear, or meaning is defined by the system. And once this freedom appears, you stop asking, "How do I escape the Matrix?" Because you see the truth. There was never a door, only identification. And when identification loosens, what remains has always been here, watching, silent, untouched. You may have noticed something subtle, not dramatic, not loud. A quiet discomfort. Moments where your old labels no longer fit. Your opinions feel borrowed. Your reactions feel automatic. You begin to sense it. The identity you call me is not stable. It reacts before you choose. It defends itself without permission. It fears things you never consciously agreed to fear. Why? Because identity was never meant to free you. It was meant to contain you. In Gnostic language, this was the cleverest design. Not chains, not torture, but a mirror. A self-image you would protect at all costs. You defend your beliefs. You defend your personality. You defend your story. And in doing so, you defend the system that gave them to you. Ask yourself quietly, if your identity were removed tonight, what would remain? No name, no role, no history. Would anything still be watching? Most people never ask this, because the question itself feels like death, and in a way, it is. Identity fears awareness, because awareness does not belong to it. Awareness does not argue. It does not panic. It does not explain itself. It simply sees. This is why the system rewards identity and punishes observation. Stay busy, stay labeled, stay emotional, stay offended, stay proud, stay ashamed, anything, but still. Because stillness is where the cracks widen, and once you glimpse the crack, you cannot unsee it. The mask begins to feel heavy. The reactions feel scripted. The world feels staged, not fake, just rehearsed. And you start to realize the Matrix never needed machines. You became the mechanism. There is a moment. It does not announce itself. When the question changes, not, is this real? But, why am I reacting this way? That question is dangerous. Because the system can survive doubt, but it cannot survive self-observation. When you watch your fear without naming it, when you notice desire without chasing it, when you observe anger without justifying it, something loosens, not dramatically, not spiritually. Psychologically, the inner narrator weakens, and with it, the illusion of a central me. This is not enlightenment. This is not awakening as people romanticize it. This is subtraction. Less identification, less certainty, less noise, and more space. That space is what the ancients warned about, not because it is evil, but because it is uncontrollable. The Demiurge does not fear rebellion. Rebellion still needs identity. It fears silence, because in silence, there is nothing to manipulate, no belief to hijack, no emotion to trigger, no story to reinforce, only presence. This is why most people retreat. They touch this space briefly and rush back to distraction, back to noise, back to being someone, because being no one feels like falling without ground. But here is the forgotten truth. You were never meant to become something new. You were meant to remember what was watching before the mask formed. No instructions will be given. No path will be outlined. No steps will be offered. Because the moment you look for guidance, identity returns. So instead, one final question remains, not to answer now, not even today, just to let it echo. If the Matrix is your identity, who is it that notices it, and why has it always been silent? If you've come this far, notice something carefully. Nothing dramatic happened, no revelation, no explosion of truth, no sudden awakening, and yet something feels different, quieter. That's because the Matrix was never meant to be exposed loudly. If it were, it would defend itself. Instead, it dissolves when ignored. All this time, you were taught to search, to improve, to become. But becoming was the trap. The system survives on motion, on goals, on identities reaching for something else. But awareness does not reach. It does not evolve. It does not progress. It does not upgrade. It is already complete. That is why it feels invisible. You've lived your entire life as a character in motion, a name, a role, a story moving through time. But now, for brief moments, you may notice something that does not move at all. It was there during fear. It was there during success. It was there before every thought said, I. It never spoke. It never interfered. It never tried to save you. Because it was never trapped. The Matrix could shape your beliefs, condition your emotions, design your identity. But it could never touch the one thing that simply watches. This is the secret the Gnostics buried in symbols. Not knowledge to collect, but recognition. You don't escape the Matrix. You stop mistaking yourself for what's inside it. And once that's seen, even for a second, nothing truly owns you again. Life continues. The world continues. The system continues. But something essential has stepped back. No label fits it. No language reaches it. No authority governs it. And that's why the final truth was never hidden. It was overlooked because it never demanded attention. So don't chase this. Don't name it. Don't turn it into an identity. Just notice, occasionally, what is aware of this moment, right now. That is where the Matrix ends, and that was always free